I think we can all agree that Vite's a pretty great piece of software. It's fundamentally changed how a lot of frameworks and tools are built in the JavaScript ecosystem, and it's made our experience as developers significantly better, whether or not you're using it directly. Do you know what's even cooler than Vite, though? Vite Plus, the unified toolchain for the web. This is going to be great, right? They're just going to take Vite and make it better. Free open source into, license and pricing. Vite Plus will be source available and offers a generous free tier. It'll be free for open source, non-commercial use. It'll have a flat fee for startups, and enterprises will have to do a custom deal. Interesting. So what are we getting for the money that we're spending? Getting everything we love about Vite plus everything we've been duct taping together. Combines Vite, Vitest, and OXC. They have this one diagram that I memed on a bit on Twitter. I don't really know what this is meant to show. But that all said, I know I'm being a little negative here. I actually have a lot of hope for Vite Plus. I think in many ways, this is a good direction for the ecosystem to be moving in as a way for a project as important and essential as Vite and the ecosystem around it to be properly funded and supported. And now that Void Zero, the company that makes Vite and OXC and all of these other tools, is VC backed and has raised money as a startup that Evan Yu is CEO of, it's now important for them to figure out what to do with all this. How do you make money off of the important work they've done in the centralization on Vite as an ecosystem? I'm also amused they didn't nerf this weird download spike that happens when people troll on NPM. Funny little looking chart. I am excited to break down what Vite Plus is, where the Vite and Void team is going, and how this will benefit us, not just as individual developers, but ideally as an ecosystem. That all said, I don't charge you guys for videos, I charge companies. So let's hear from one of them really quick. Quick question. What's the hardest problem for engineering teams to solve? You might be thinking of things like picking the right language, scaling your services, figuring out where the outage is coming from. But there's one problem that is significantly harder than all of those combined. That problem is, of course, hiring. And hiring the right person just got a hell of a lot easier thanks to our friends over at G2I. These guys really, really deeply understand hiring. They've built an incredible network of thousands of talented engineers that are ready to go, be it for a short sprint for a couple months or a full-time career at your company. If you're trying to hire, you should at least talk to these guys because they'll make sure you're not over or under hiring and work with you to figure out what you need without having to hire some recruiter to work at your company full-time just to spam people on LinkedIn. A ton of huge companies have already been using G2I like Webflow, 1Password, Automatic, Meta, and more. But they've been even better for these smaller companies, like the early stage startups ready to hire their third or fourth engineer. Don't go through the hell of doing that yourself. Seriously, do you know how cool it is to have a platform where you can just check the boxes for the things you want the developers to know how to do? Then you write some questions that G2I will go ask the developers on your behalf, and then you get to review video responses from real candidates and figure out who you think fits your team best. It's their goal to go from interview to first PR shipped in under a week, and I've seen them do this multiple times now. It's actually super impressive. In a world of crappy AI-generated resumes piling up as soon as you do a public listing, this is such a breath of fresh air. Not having to fight through the madness to just find one good engineer, or maybe three for a one-off project that you're building, or whatever your team needs, big, small, short, long, whatever you're trying to do, you should talk to people who actually know how to hire for it and have the network necessary to do it. I love helping engineers find jobs, but I'll never be able to do it at this scale. And more I find myself just telling founders, if you're looking for engineers, there's no better place than G2I. So if you're ready to start hiring, look no further. Check them out now at soydev.link/G2I. Vite Plus is an interesting project. I grabbed the announcement post. I've been talking with the team a bunch, but I'd rather just let Evan say it in his own words, what Vite Plus is.
So what Vite Plus does is it's a unified layer that's leveraging all these open source pieces that we've been building. And imagine Vite, but more powerful. In addition to dev and build, we now also have Vite Linked, powered by OX Linked, Vite Format, powered by OX Format, Vite Test, powered by Vitest, Vite Lib, powered by TSDown, Vite New, that's scaffolding and code generation, or also code mods, or adding additional things that you can customize. Vite Run is a monorepo task runner and cache system, similar to TurboRepo/NX. Vite Install, currently, we are not building our own package manager. We do recommend you use PnPM. But Vite Install is essentially a replacement for CorePack / Anthony's NI package. So when you run Vite install,
if you're not familiar with Ni, by the way, it will use whatever the right package manager is for the project you're in. So if you do like Ni install in something using PNPM, it'll use PNPM. If you use it in something that's using Bun, it'll use Bun, NPM, Yarn, etc. It was built during that era where everybody was changing package managers all the time to make it easier to hop between them.
You probably know Corpack is being removed in Node.js 26, right? So Vite install is just a convenience method for you to
I'm still so mad about the Corpack thing.
Say, okay, if I have the package manager field in my package JSON, then just use this specific version, and we will just make sure the right package manager is used. And there's Vite UI. That's the GUI DevTools that Anthony has been, talking about yesterday. So
I have not taken a look at the GUI DevTools. I'm a little skeptical. I find that every time someone tries to make like a dev tool or like a package adjacent thing as a UI, that it gets poorly supported and falls apart over time. Especially in other ecosystems I've seen this. Like I've seen failed attempts in Rails. I've seen failed attempts in Laravel. Just let me use my CLI, man. I am curious about Antfu's talk though, because I do trust Anthony a lot. He's really, really good. We'll take a look at the demo in a bit, but I want to read through the announcement post and give my thoughts. Announcing Vite Plus, a unified toolchain for JavaScript. So what is Vite Plus? It's a command line developer tool you can install from NPM just like Vite itself. It's a drop-in upgrade to Vite with additional features. Imagine that in addition to Vite Dev and Vite Build, you can now also run Vite New for scaffolding new projects. We can already do create Vite. Interesting. I like the idea of you can use it for making a sub-package easily with monorepos. Good monorepo support is hellish, and I've been trying to bully the Bun guys into doing this better. The response from them has pretty much been, I don't feel like I know enough about how monorepos and TypeScript work and what people need to do this right. The Vite guys know this very well. I am very excited to see what they cook there overall, but to be determined. I feel so burnt on TurboRepo and NX and Lerna and all of the attempts we've had in the ecosystem that it sucks, because monorepos should be really good, but due to tooling, they aren't. Speaking of things that should be good but weren't due to the tooling that now are kind of okay, Vitest has become huge. It provides a Jest-compatible API, works out of the box with your main app, and includes comprehensive features like browser mode, sharding, visual regression testing, and more. This is all part of Vitest, which is built on top of Vitest. So now in our ecosystem, I'm sorry, I have to make a joke about this. I now know of a software named Vitess, which is for MySQL sharding. Vitess, with an E at the end, which is a static site template that, if I recall, is for Vue and Vite. There's Vitest, which is a test framework for Vite that works in other tools as well. And now Vite Test. Vite plus integration of Vitest. We have Vitest, and Vite Test. How do we get here? I'm sorry, I had to make the joke. They're also doing Vite Lint, which lets you lint code using OXLint, which already has 600 ES-compatible rules and is up to 100 times faster than ESLint. It also has type-aware linting, which is a very annoying problem to solve. Very excited for that to integrate with TypeScript Go and be super, super fast. It also has plugins written in JS with an ESLint-compatible API. Very fun. I've talked about this a bit before, but I'm really excited for static Hermes to get a little further along so you can compile things like a ESLint JavaScript plugin to native code and then integrate it with OXLint written in Rust to have much better performance overall. There's also Vite Format, which will let you format your code using Aux format, which is apparently coming out soon. It's their equivalent of Prettier. It's 99% plus Prettier compat while offering more control and flexibility. I don't need more control and flexibility from Prettier. If you look at the Prettier configs in most of my projects, you'll understand why I say that. Oh, we actually have a bit more configured here than I would have thought. Some of my team really likes sort imports, Julius. I don't care about that. There's import order parser plugin for doing the import order stuff. But other than that, it's basically just Prettier plugin Tailwind and the custom Tailwind functions for it. Otherwise, I don't really configure my Prettier RC. I like that I don't have to have an opinion on my formatting anymore. Ooh, apparently OXLint's already using TSGo. Nice. Yeah, they have TSGo lint that they're working on, which uses the TypeScript Go code. 20 to 40 times faster than ESLint plus TypeScript ESLint. Very exciting. I will absolutely be using TSGo lint and OXLint when it makes sense to. They're also doing Vite lib, which helps you bundle libraries with best practices baked in. I am so excited for a serious attempt at this. TS up was way more essential than it should have been, and I would imagine even Egoist here agrees. I love this guy. He's great. He's actually building one of the biggest T3 chat competitors, funny enough, with ChatWise. Love this dude. Also his handle, localhost5173, Vite reference. He gets it. I've donated to him, and I earned my thanks here, which I'm very proud of. If you're not familiar with what he did with TS up, he combined ES build with a little bit of config, so it's way easier to take a TypeScript file or code base and turn it into an NPM package that you can put in other projects. It was the first attempt to like really streamline a modern TypeScript code base's ability to turn into a package. And there's so many little things like to get the type definitions right, to get the output files right. Not fun. And he did a lot of the work for it because he liked making a lot of packages. This got relatively popular, but was not something he thought like should be this big standard. He just built it because he needed it. And then it went way more popular than he expected. Didn't want to keep maintaining it. So the crew over at Void Zero started TS down, similar to rollup and rolldown, where rollup was the JavaScript bundler and rolldown is them rewriting it in Rust. TS down is a similar project where they're trying to rewrite TS up in Rust. To be fair, TS up was using ES build, which is in Go, so it was really fast. But the goal with TS down is to have the whole toolchain in one language, TypeScript. I thought it was in Rust. What the fuck? Is this just a TypeScript wrapper around rolldown? Is that all it is? Okay, so this is literally the same thing as TS up with ES build. This is with rolldown. That is hilarious. And I know rolldown's not just a rollup Rust port. I know you guys are doing a lot more. Sorry, Alex. You could have named it better if it was more than that. You could have named it Rolldown Plus. Naming's hard. Consult me next time if you're struggling. They also have Vite Run, which is similar to like Turborepo's runner for managing a large repo so that you can run the right set of things in parallel, like your backend and your front end, like the bundler for your component library and the UI, the different pieces. They also have intelligent caching, which is a really useful feature that they could hypothetically charge money for. I'm not sure how much money people are actually spending on Turborepo caching. They've saved an ungodly amount of hours due to how Turborepo works with that shared cache. It is cool, but I don't know how valuable that is in terms of like money. Apparently, it saved Descript $20,000 by cutting their build times so much. And there's Vite UI, which is the GUI DevTools offering insights into module resolution, transform behaviors, bundle size, tree shaking, integration with framework-specific DevTools. I can't help myself. I want to see a bit of this. Okay, I'm giving a brief skim of these tools, and there's a lot here. They have CSS inspectors. They have plugin inspectors to see like what files build into what outputs and like how much space is being saved. Or like here, the styles are getting bloated because during build, it's pulling in plugins that bloat the style size. I like the before and after here. I don't necessarily like this method of showing all of it because once you have enough files, this is going to become impossibly large. Like, can you search through it? Sure, but I like the overview style for these types of things, like Webpack Bundle Analyzer. I have cited this a bunch, and I use it all the time. It's a plugin in Webpack. There's an equivalent in Rollup. That is what you would use if you were using Vite right now. That lets you see what is taking up how much of space in your production bundles. Super, super useful tool. There's also, according to Alex here, thank you for showing up here and helping out, there's chunk relationships, insights and transforms, performance charts, etc. This is Vite plugin inspect. It'll show a nicer view. It's in a few slides. This ESLint config inspect, that feels a little unnecessary, but the node module inspect is what I'm interested in.
I don't know if it's only me or something, but have you ever been curious about like what things actually inside the black hole? So I made this node module inspector. So I want to see what's the dirty things inside the black hole. So this will show you the full graph of the relationship of all the packages inside your node modules. So you can play with it. You can see why your package is why your node module is so big.
I will give you all the early warning. Never run this on React Native. You can run on React all you want. It has like 2 depths, but React Native, if you run this on it, either your computer will crash or you will, from the heart attack that you'll have.
I recommend you to try this tool when you have a good moon, because it'll make your moon bad. So, but it's definitely useful to know.
That was a good joke. Don't use this when you are feeling good, because it'll make you feel bad. Real.
Know what you actually have and probably do some action with it. Okay. And then you can also, like with this node module inspector, you can also see how each package is contributing to node module side by size and side by side, something like.
Okay, this is cool for like the node modules that I'm installing when I run Vite install. But what this isn't helping me with is the actual bundle outputs, which is what I care about. So with like Webpack Bundle Analyzer, these are the JS files that you're loading into the browser. It's like framework dash, whatever the hash is, polyfill, whatever the hash is, app hash, and then we have some other small pieces that are only loaded on certain routes, usually is what these like fully hashed files are for. But these are the files the user gets, which is when I care about the bloat. I don't necessarily care how much like modules are being downloaded by my devs when they run install for the first time. I care a lot more about the bundles that my users are getting. Okay. They do have a bundle file list, but do they have that really cool view for it though? Because that's what I liked, was the view showing me the way that the bundle was split. Okay, there is a graph button, but what I want is this super nice inspector view for the bundles. So apparently that does exist, but it isn't in the slides, sadly. Good to know, though. It's in the slides? Okay, here we are. Found it.
So in Vite DevTools, we're going to visualize the presentation of the size of the dependency based on your real usage, based on your real tree shakings. Yeah. And that said, I want to mention that we have all these cool things visualized, but Vite DevTools is not only about internal data visualization. So if you think about the UI we just talked about, you find that we might not often need them as regular developers. I think this mostly for plugin authors or like meta framework builders. They may want to know the internals. So it could be a little bit too advanced for our daily development. So this actually totally makes sense, because Vite is designed to be framework agnostic. Agnostic means that we don't know about the framework you use, and we shouldn't know. And it gives Vite great flexibility and extendability to be the infrastructure of modern frameworks. But it also makes hard for Vite to present interesting information that's more closer to the app, to the Vite user, to the app you are building, and to know the state of your framework, of your React state, or how many times you have been rendered for the components, etc. So
this is too long a visualizer, but I like the idea of Vite being the center point that allows for all of these other tools to get better visualization. Like it'll work with Nux DevTools. You can bring your own things in. Very exciting stuff. And if anyone other than AntFu was working on this, I'd be way more skeptical, because normally I'm just not fond of these attempts to do like a visual tool chain. So you have to maintain so much shit. But the fact that it's AntFu, the fact that he's finally being paid a full-time salary to work on things like this, and that this is his job, makes me much more excited that this might actually become useful. Fingers crossed. I'm hopeful. Check out his talk and Evan's talk on the ViteConf channel if you want to see more in depth on that. Back to where we were. All of these commands work seamlessly together out of the box without the need for complex config or compatibility plumbing. Vite Plus inherits Vite's thriving ecosystem, so it's compatible with mainstream frameworks like React and Vue, but also full-stack meta frameworks like TanStack Start and SvelteKit. Because each command is built on or compatible with widely adopted tools, adopting Vite Plus doesn't require massive refactoring if you're already using those tools. The entire suite of commands is built on a shared foundation to ensure cohesion and consistency. We've implemented the full compiler toolchain in Rust, from the parser to the resolver, transformer, minifier, and bundler, with obsessive performance tuning at every level. All of this info is open source and already widely adopted by companies like Framer, Linear, Atlassian, Shopify, and more. Utilities like parse and transformer are also exported from Vite Plus as APIs to support custom tooling. You can watch the demo from Evan's talk at ViteConf to get a sneak peek of Vite Plus in action. That'll be fun. We'll check it in a little bit. So what's the problem that Vite Plus is trying to solve? The JS ecosystem has seen its fair share of fragmentation and churn over the years. As a language originally designed in 10 days, no one could have imagined that we'd be building apps of today's scale and complexity with JS. Tooling complexity and performance have become real bottlenecks for companies facing ever larger web projects, but limited internal tooling resources. These bottlenecks are more severe for companies with multiple teams, each using their own unique tooling choices. Tasks like dependency management or security reviews must be handled separately for each team. Dependency combinations drift out of sync between projects and get harder and harder to reconcile over time. If teams or projects are merged, then developer time must be paid to migrate tools or end up with a convoluted Frankenstein tool stack. With Vite Plus, we aim to offer a unified solution for JS tooling so teams facing these challenges can focus on shipping products instead of wasting time evaluating, bike shedding, configuring, and debugging their tool stack. We'll talk about the licensing part in a sec. I want to go on a bit of a rant. A question I'm thinking about constantly as I go over all of this is, why now? Why is right now the time where we're finally going to unify the toolchain in JavaScript? There's a couple layers to this. I'm going to start with a weird way of thinking. Given two languages and pretending no others exist, JS and Rust, why would you pick one over the other? Well, JS runs in the browser, but Rust does over WASM. Rust is better at file I/O and management, but JS's concurrency helps a lot. I just don't think it's as simple as like one for one reason, the other for the other reason. But a more general spectrum is how I tend to think of it. Where does the thing you're building fall? And what stuff does it interface with? How often is it being used? How much does performance affect it? Is it worth dealing with memory management or not? All of these details are worth considering when you make decisions. But one of the biggest ones by far is flexibility. Even huge Rust fanboys, or I guess ex-Rust fanboys like Primogen, will admit that when you're trying to make a flexible code base, you're trying to make changes to a code base and like the project's goals change. If you built it in Rust, you're in for a rough time and you might be better off just rewriting. If you build it in JS, for the most part, whatever. Obviously, having to make significant architectural changes always sucks no matter what, but some languages are more flexible with those types of things than others. In an ecosystem where things are changing constantly, like in JavaScript, the flexibility is really nice. But it's kind of hard to like do the chicken and egg here because on one hand, JS is able to be so flexible and have all of this churn and have all of this improvement and all of these changes because the language is flexible enough to allow it. But on the other hand, once things have gotten pretty good, the continued change and churn could be argued to not actually be great for the ecosystem and is more a result of that flexibility. The flexibility allows for JavaScript to have more innovation, more changes, more improvements going on in the ecosystem. But on the other side, it kind of encourages a level of churn that might not be ideal once you hit a certain point in quality. It also has a lower barrier for entry, and since we're all writing JavaScript anyways, if our tools are in JavaScript, we can contribute to them. Even I've been able to make changes to Vite. I know I'm a dumb JS soy boy, and that tool's too important for me to touch, but they were doing some weird things with URL parsing back in the day, and I was upset, and I filed PRs to fix it. There are real value adds that come from your tooling being in the same language as the tool is for. So if you're writing a tool for JavaScript, doing it in JavaScript is really valuable because now people who are using the tool are more likely to know enough to make changes. And as you shift down this spectrum from JS to Rust, the likelihood that a random person can contribute goes down. But it also means that the performance you get can and probably will be significantly higher. But that also means you have to be more careful about who is contributing and what they're contributing because you have to pay more attention to those details to get it right. And now I'm going to make the kind of crazy argument. As you choose to have your project take less contributions, as you choose to own it individually or independently as a team or company, and you're careful about who is working on this, and it's a small set of people who are paid real money to work on it, the ability for external people to contribute matters less and less. Like it matters more that someone can contribute to your docs than to your parser in a product like Rolldown. Because if I have some problem that I ran into because the docs were wrong, I should be able to go and file a pull request fixing the docs. But I run into a problem because the parser didn't work how I expected it to. That should probably be an issue that the team then goes and fixes. As such, the choice to do a lot of this tooling in Rust makes a ton of sense because it lets them get the ultimate performance, and they don't want a lot of external contributions in the same way they might have before with Vite. Vite could not have gotten where it is today if it wasn't for the fact that it was open source, written in JavaScript, and allowed for everyone to contribute, adopt, and build into and around it. On the other hand, Vite Plus is very interesting because Vite Plus will not have that level of community contribution. There's a lot of layers to why, but the big thing I think we should all just acknowledge is that your time as a free contributor probably isn't best spent in a project that is making money off your contributions with you not having any ability to redistribute it or use it without paying for it. Like if I am at a company using Vite Plus and I contribute a change that makes it better, and then we decide we want to cut spending, or some higher up decides they want to cut spending and cut out the Vite Plus spend, there is code I wrote that I was paid money to write for my company that I've lost access to because we're not paying the license for that change or for that tool. And that's scary. This happened to a lot of businesses and a lot of companies that are doing these source available licenses where the incentive for contribution goes to not zero, but very close to it. There's a lot less reason for developers to contribute to code that they have to pay to use in the first place. At the same time, there is less willingness to contribute when it's in Rust. If we think about this with like two specific tools, like ESLint versus OXLint, ESLint could be argued as easy to contribute, community funded, and fully OSS. Any contribution can hurt perf. We'll always have a perf ceiling, and that ceiling is going to be not great. In comparison, something like OXLint, hard to contribute, funded by a private co, Void Zero, strict performance culture, so they don't let anything merge if it will potentially hurt the perf at all. Well-paid team of obsessed perf people. The harsh reality is that in order for this to exist, community contribution isn't enough. Random devs aren't willing to donate money to projects. The fact that earlier when I went to Egoist's profile, that one of his top supporters is me as an independent YouTuber that recognized his work, and there are about 35 or so of us total for a project that was essential for how like half or more TypeScript packages were bundled at the time, is kind of crazy if you think about it. That a dev as important as Egoist that is building this for so many people has 30-something supporters sponsoring him for his work. That's not enough to like pay rent, much less fund a team of really talented developers to work on a thing. And ESLint relies almost exclusively on contributions from external people, volunteers, and a tiny bit of sponsor money. It's also worth thinking about this in terms of how much effort does it take for a given thing to be built. For ESLint, a lot of time had to be spent figuring out how this should work, what people want, what they'll do with it, and what like the final result will be. But the actual implementation work, while not fun, is not too bad. Whereas with OXLint, a lot of those initial, like, how do we want to use this? How are developers going to consume this? What types of plugins do people want? All of that has already been figured out over a decade plus of ESLint iteration. God, I can't even imagine if we were doing this back in the day where we had a separate TSLint from ESLint, how miserable it would be, because eventually TSLint got merged into ESLint as a set of plugins. But all of this churn, all of this change, all of this stuff has been figured out by a large open source community of contributors. And OXLint gets to skip a lot of that stuff, thereby making it viable to do this in Rust because the flexibility is less necessary. But now they need support and funding, which they have some of, and there are still people volunteering working for free on OXLint because they care a lot about it. But a handful of them are now employees of Void Zero and are being paid full-time salaries to figure this all out. Changing this because not all of them are paid, but I wanted to make sure that's called out because there are people on OXLint that are paid full-time to work on the OXC and OXLint ecosystem to make a fast Rust-based alternative to the chaos that is where ESLint has gotten. Trying to find a more simple way to put the contrast I'm trying to draw here, the thing I'm thinking here that I'm trying to communicate is the idea that this flexibility allowed for the need to grow and be better understood. And if we had started with something like this, the likelihood we got as far as we are today would have been near zero. But even today, just going out and doing this is barely worth it because rewriting anything in Rust is expensive, especially in an ecosystem where the majority of people in it don't know Rust. They just know JavaScript. Like if Vite was originally written in Rust, I would never have contributed those URL fixes. It might have just sat there and been broken forever. Since it was in JavaScript, I could do it. And now a spec and a set of needs can form over time that is represented well by the Vite API. Now rewriting those parts makes more sense. ESLint was absolutely an example of that, where it took decades to get everything figured out just right. And it's now figured out enough that the churn has gone down and rewriting in Rust and building an alternative in Rust makes sense. But we still have other problems. So the what does it do problem has been solved. But the who contributes and who pays problems are less so. Because what does it do? Figured out by ESLint. Who contributes? For ESLint, it's the community of JS devs. For OXLint, it can't be because it's in Rust. So that means we need a different set of devs for it. But then who pays? Well, if we're being frank right now, it's VCs who are paying. A bunch of venture capitalists have invested money into Void Zero and into Evan Yu's company, and that money is being used to pay some of these people to do it. But VCs aren't investing out of the kindness of their heart, no matter what they say. VCs are investing because they hope to make a return. So how can you possibly make enough money off of a tool like OXLint to justify VC money being raised and invested? Because you don't just want to make back, like let's say the devs on it are being paid $300K a year. If that's the cost, making $400K a year is not going to make those VCs happy because they're expecting a 100x return. They're expecting the costs to be very small relative to the income eventually in the future. That's a hard and expensive thing to figure out. So now the question is, where do you get that money? How do you charge people for it? Because if you make it closed source, that's not going to work. No one wants to use closed source software at the very least. Is there a balance that we can find here where OXLint is open, not necessarily so people will contribute, but so people can trust, fork, and rely on it? But at the same time, there is a higher value prop that is allowing them to make money so they can justify the investment into it. And that is what this licensing section is for at the end of this announcement. Sustainability has always been a challenge for open source dev tooling. Our goal of Vite Plus is to capture a portion of the value that it creates at scale for larger orgs and reinvest it into the open source projects that power Vite Plus. To ensure wider community benefits as well, Vite Plus will be free for individuals, open source projects, and small businesses. We plan to offer a flat annual licensing price for startups and custom pricing for enterprises. Though Vite Plus will be commercially licensed, it will be source available. Exact tier thresholds and licensing details will be announced closer to the public launch. We understand that commercialization on top of open source can raise concerns with the community. Throughout our years of open source work, we know the balance is delicate and built on trust. We are committed to pursuing a commercialization path that serves the best interests of both our open source software and commercial users. It is important to emphasize that Vite Plus is a separate additive layer built on top of open source projects that we maintain. All existing projects, Vite, Vitest, Rolldown, and OXC, will remain open source under MIT forever. Since Vite Plus relies on these open source tools, improving Vite Plus requires improving them as well. You're welcome to hold us accountable to that commitment. Yeah. So OXLint will stay open source. Things like it will stay open source. The other parts, especially the ones that are new here, are a little bit more questionable. So like, will the UI stuff be open source and like MIT licensed? Will the Monorepo stuff be open source and MIT licensed? Probably not for these two. For the rest, they're built on the other things, so the other things underneath will still be. But this now raises a more important question. Will anyone actually buy this? My gut feel right now is no. There has not been a good record for attempts to do this type of thing. Closed to open tends to go really well in the web dev and general software development world. Back when we had Unix as our only server solution, Linux was able to appear and very quickly take over the market as the free and open alternative. Back in the day, Linus managed his source code with BitKeeper, and then when he got into licensing issues with it, he created Git, which almost immediately became the industry standard. Minimal code editors like Sublime Text were all the rage when I got into software development, and now VS Code has almost entirely won the space. Generally speaking, at least from the time I have lived in software, there isn't really a pendulum between open and closed, like there are pendulums between flexibility and optimization, or pendulums between client and server. Like there's a lot of things where we swing back and forth in the developer world, but for the most part, we swing towards the open source solution, and the industry trends towards that, especially when it comes to the things that we're integrating into our code bases and projects. I can't even remember the last time I installed a package that was proprietary enough to like require a custom license. Like we've done it in the past, but it's been a bit. And that's the hard problem here. We have gotten so used to these tools and this ecosystem and all the things we consume in the web dev world being fully open source that we've largely just expected that for a while now. And will Vite Plus provide enough immediate value for us to justify its adoption? I find that when you're doing that type of thing, like the closed source option in a largely open space, you have to bring a ton of value. One example that just came up in chat was AG Grid. AG Grid is a really, really good solution for adding complex grid and visualization components to your applications. They've sponsored me in the past. I don't think we have a deal right now, but they were one of the first to reach out when we did the sponsor stuff. AG Grid is awesome. They not only have a really good free-to-use solution for every major framework for handling complex data grids, they let you use it for free for the most part. But when you want the fancy plugins, customization, a lot of the advanced filtering, and the things that make it exceptionally good, you can buy an enterprise license or a bundle with a couple other things as well. They also contribute actively to open source solutions too. I don't know if they'll say on the homepage, but they donated a bunch of money to Tanner to help fund TanStack Table, which is an open source alternative to AG Grid. So if you want to use that, you can. But if you want the actual best performing solution for whatever you use, AG Grid is the best solution. So why am I bringing this up? Other than the fact that they charge money for it and they make quite a bit of money for it, it's so apparent as soon as you show up here what you're getting for your money. It's an immediate, well, yeah, I need this right now. If you're building a table in your application, or you've already built a table in your application, not having to deal with it anymore and just using AG Grid will save you so much time and money, it makes no sense to not. It's one big obvious thing. AG Grid is the best way to put a high-performance, filterable, customizable table in your app. What's the equivalent pitch for that for Vite Plus? This is why I'm hesitant. I don't know how I can pitch Vite Plus. I think about this a lot because I do a lot of sponsors. I've worked with 80 plus companies at this point. So I need a way to explain why you should use this thing in 1 to 3 sentences that I could say at lunch or dinner with a friend. And I don't know what those would be for Vite Plus. Because it's Vite Plus, it does everything for your web toolchain. What does that mean? It's like Vite and has all of Vite's features, so dev and build. It has Vitest built in. It has a monorepo tool, kind of like TurboRepo, has caching for that. It has a UI for showing all of the stuff going on in your dev tools. But you have to list so many things for it to be valuable. And that makes it really hard to sell. The easiest products to sell are the ones that have an obvious, apparent value. So one of my other sponsors, CodeRabbit, I think is a really good example of this. AI reviews your code, cutting your review times significantly. Easy pitch. I don't think adding AI magically makes the pitch better, to be clear, Alex. But the point I'm trying to make here is it should be easy for me to explain to a coworker what the value of this thing is. The product and the value with something like CodeRabbit is easy. The product, AI code review. The value, review times cut in half. Vite Plus, the product, unified toolchain. The value, things are easier to set up, I guess, hopefully. It's really hard to pitch this one. But as was said in chat earlier, if any one of these values is done properly, it can be worth it. Where was Cooper here? If Vite Plus provides good monorepo experience for Nest, like Vitest plus libs plus caching, I'll probably bully our org into buying it. This is the key. It needs to provide a big enough immediate value that is clear enough and exciting enough to the devs that they will adopt it and pay for it. You have to think about when does a tool get adopted? With CodeRabbit, you can adopt it at basically any point in the history of your company. You can adopt it as a solo dev just getting started. You can adopt it as a huge team on one project. There's a lot of places where the adoption story can happen. With Vite Plus, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Can I use this as an alternative CLI for scaffolding projects? Sure. If I'm using it for free as an independent dev and I start working on a thing with it, is the expectation that once we get big enough that I have multiple employees and customers, that I then have to graduate into paying for it? Is it that I expect to start for free independently, get big enough, then pay? Or is it that I'm already a big company that's making money and I'm having these problems and it solves those problems, so I adopt it then? When do I adopt problem feels very big for this product. I don't know when I would adopt Vite Plus right now. At what point in my journey do I make the move? The hardest part here is when you make a new thing, the initial adopters are the people who like trying new things, and those adopters aren't people who spend money. They are people who are trying the thing out for fun, seeing how it benefits them. Maybe they'll throw $20 at it if they're working out on the side and they have some income. But it's very rare for people who are trying out these new things right when they drop to do it in a way that affects their businesses for a while, which means making money off them is really hard.
So what we do with V Plus is, first of all, Vite install makes sure it's always installed using the right version of the right package manager. It's also inherently cached. So if the log file and your node modules directory doesn't change, it won't actually run it again. And also because it's the caching is so fast, right? So every command that you run, before any Vite plus command you run, we actually do the check first to make sure dependency is actually up to date. So you don't run into situations where like you run build, somehow it's not producing the expected result because you change your package.json, you forgot to run install again. Okay, so
this is one of those things that like is good and sounds good, but like I wish just being better sold. I really do. But improving a million small things does not make the product sellable. It makes the product better. But this isn't a real value add that like will be perceived by people spending money. Like if you came up to me and said, if you pay me $100 right now, you will never run into a problem that has been caused by drift in package managers again, I would think twice about it. And I've run into a lot of these problems.
In case you don't know, DTS files performs better when you use it for type checking. Bundled DTS performs even better than separate DTS files. So bundling DTS actually has meaningful performance implications when you have a really huge project, right? If you have
we are so in the weeds of things people don't understand or care about. This is my fear. Watch the whole demo, but I recommend you do if you're curious. Links in the description for the whole talk. The vibe I'm getting from it is just deep in the weeds of paper cut solving. There are things like what he just talked about, where if you split out a DTS file, it performs better. And if you bundle it, so you actually like compress it and cut as much data out as possible and like get rid of like white space and stuff, performs even better than that. That's such a paper cut. No one's going to understand this in a like pitch. Or that the Vite I command runs with whatever package manager you have declared in package.json, so drift between package managers across your team matters less. That's a problem that's affected me, but not enough to spend money on and not enough to like include in your pitch. A thing I talk a lot about with founders is the idea that your pitch should make most of your employees feel a bit bad. It sucks to put it that way, but it's better to have a pitch that is reducing your product to a very small subset to get the value add across than it is to detail all of the cool things you do, because then people lose interest if the first three aren't immediately really important to them. You should order your list of features by thing that your hair is most on fire about to thing that barely matters at the bottom, and then cut everything but the top three. And the problem here is that they're not solving hair on fire problems. They're solving a bunch of small annoyances. There's a great how to pitch your startup video by Michael that he did for this random conference that I think about way too much. Okay, here's the part I was looking for.
Number two, they try to be 100% accurate. There were a lot of details I left out of Airbnb in that 2-sentence description with the example, but it was clear and easy to understand. Your goal should be 80% accurate, 100% clear, not 100% accurate, 50% clear. I talked about an example that's too general. What I could have said about Airbnb is, for example, if you are in a place that has a big event and you need to pay your rent, you can rent your place out and then you can pay your rent. Same basic story, none of the little facts that make it stick in your memory and make you understand.
This is the key. I feel like there are so many details that they're trying to share that the value prop gets lost in the process. The harshest way of putting this is that anybody who has these problems that can spend money has already solved them, and the cost of switching is high enough that cost of switching plus cost to pay plus unsure value add makes it hard to decide if you'll bother and hard to adopt in the first place. So the people who have the money to adopt have already solved the problem. They're not going to. The people who haven't solved the problem yet don't have the money. Whether or not they ever will is a question. It just, all of this makes the value prop harder. So I am personally kind of skeptical of how adoption will look because the pitch is really hard, both to understand and to make. The point of adoption is unclear, and the value prop compared to doing it yourself with the existing open source tools is not immediate and focused enough. And what it really needs to be valuable is less bullet points, less things being listed, and more immediate, obvious value with a specific thing or pain point that people experience. I don't know if web dev is too hard and has too many tools is a direct enough problem to solve in this way. I think monorepos suck, and if you're a big business with a lot of packages, managing it is terrible, is a real problem that can be solved. And if that's what they're going to focus on, cool. But I suspect this more general shotgun approach is going to really hurt the marketing and the ability to sell this product. I don't know. I could be entirely wrong. And it's one of those cases where I really want to be wrong. I would love for this to be successful because it won't just boost Void Zero and Vite really far into the future. It'll enable a new method for powerful, useful open source products to make actual money. But historically, we have not seen this method succeed. But I'm hopeful this time it will. I have my skepticism. I have my confusion around how you sell this product and how you get someone to adopt it in a way that they'll start paying money. But we will see. And I'm curious to see where it goes. I really want them to win. I want more money in the space. I want Void Zero to be the most successful tooling company in JavaScript ever. But I don't know how I would pitch this to my friends who work at Twitch right now. And that's the thing that gives me fear. If I don't know how to sell this to my friends who work at enterprises like Amazon, at Twitch, even at like medium-sized companies like the ones I work with a lot and invest in, companies like Cursor, I don't know how I would convince them to use this. So I don't know how they make money yet. I really hope I'm wrong on this one. Let me know what you guys think. Are you excited for Vite Plus, or do you not see yourself using this? I'm so curious how y'all feel. Let me know what you think. And until next time, peace, nerds.